Success isn't just about strategy, it's about trust. At Bose Public Affairs Group, we put clients first with responsiveness, integrity, and a focus on results. Our team includes former policymakers and government leaders who anticipate issues, navigate challenges, and build winning strategies. From the halls of Congress to the state capitol to City Hall, we understand great outcomes start with listening. Bose Public Affairs Group.
Bose means business.
Hey everybody, welcome to Crossroads Politics here on WTHR+. I'm Dustin Grove.
And I'm Emily Longnecker. This week, a raft of new laws went into effect here in Indiana.
Let's start with that controversial law that bans so-called street camping. Critics say it basically makes homelessness a crime.
I went out with a group that serves Hoosier veterans who are homeless to see how it's impacting them. In the shade of this overpass, just days before America's 250th birthday.
My grandfather's birthday was actually on, the 4th of July.
Amber Plank recalls celebrating the holiday as a little girl.
We would have a big old celebration. And it was one of the happiest times of my childhood.
At 39, though, for this National Guard veteran, the 4th of July looks very different now.
It's just another day.
Another day of Amber moving from one spot to the next, looking for a place to camp for the night.
I guess you'd call me a floater.
People just like us, they got a story to tell. Help you out in any kind of way. Are you trying to get off the street?
Rodney Jackson would know. He was a homeless veteran once too.
Unless you've been through it, you don't have a clue as to how these people feel, man.
Now Rodney works with HVAF, helping veterans and families, driving through the city every day, looking for veterans like Amber, offering help. Sometimes, like today, that's a bottle of water and a conversation about housing resources through HVAF.
We don't put no pressure on anybody. We just come in when they're ready.
But for people like Amber still living outside, that kind of timeline may no longer be entirely up to them. A new state law banning camping on public property takes effect today. Under the new law, people camping outside have 48 hours to move at least 300 feet if police ask them to. If they don't, they could face up to 60 days in jail and a $500 fine. The new law directs police to first make sure the person is not in need of an emergency mental health detention. If that's not the case, police can offer them a connection to resources for shelter.
This is not an easy issue that can be solved with one simple bill.
The law's author, Republican State Senator Cindy Carrasco, says there's more work to do to better understand what resources communities need to get people off the streets.
Do we actually have enough beds? Do we not have any beds? Should we have beds? Should we designate certain places? Those conversations were not being had, and that's just the reality.
Carrasco says now they are.
This bill is forcing and starting those conversations. So I see that as progress. And like I said, doing nothing was just not an alternative for me anymore.
For Amber Plank, she'd like to have a conversation too.
The way they could help is come out here and spend at least one day in our shoes.
Right now, this veteran just wondering what the next few hours will bring.
Where will you sleep tonight?
Not sure, but I'll figure it out. I always do.
4th of July fireworks and barbecues, now just a distant memory of her childhood.
Emily, when you went out there with HVAF, the group called Helping Veterans and Families, what was their mood as this new law takes effect?
So they have concerns. They basically know where folks kind of are located, at least for a few days or a week. People that are unhoused, they say, they move from place to place, but they get an idea of where folks are. And their concern is that this law, will have people moving more often than they usually do, and that they will have a hard time looking for them and trying to, give them resources or connect them with help. And they say when they, meet folks, veterans who are unhoused or anyone that's unhoused, they try and convince them, hey, would you like to come in? You heard him say, are you ready to come up off the street, right? And they say, sometimes people are and sometimes they're not. So in that moment, they just offer water or resources or food or, a hygiene pack, that kind of thing. So they're concerned that this law will impact their ability to locate people quickly.
How will the law itself work?
So, I mean, it lays out a framework, but it's kind of unclear how each department will implement it. Here in Indianapolis, the Office of Public Health and Safety oversees outreach. They referred us to IMPD. I asked the bill's author, Senator Carrasco. She also referred me to the police. I did ask IMPD, but they sent me a statement almost identical to one they sent after the bill's passage, saying in part, quote, IMPD will continue to follow all state laws while remaining committed to partnering with city agencies and community organizations to address homelessness in our city. IMPD and OPHS have been coordinating on Indy's Streets to Homes initiative to find housing for people living on the streets around Indianapolis. Keep in mind, though, there are police departments all across the state that will be implementing this law, and the law does give a framework about what steps law enforcement should take when they encounter someone camping on public property.
All right, something we'll, of course, continue to monitor and watch as we move forward. That, of course, wasn't the only law that went into effect this week, so let's kind of tick through some of the others.
Yeah, July 1st was the start of several other laws. That includes one of Republicans' flagship pieces of legislation. It addresses housing costs and increasing Indiana's housing supply. Starting this week, local governments won't be able to increase the fees charged for permits more than once every 5 years. They also won't be able to increase those fees by much more than the rate of inflation. While most of the new law focuses on making housing easier to build, critics point to several provisions they say reduce safety, including prohibiting local governments from requiring some fire safety features in some situations.
Affordability was a big focus this past legislative session. Lawmakers addressed utility affordability specifically for one of their signature bills that became law. That law changes the rules for utility rate hikes. So instead of asking for increases one case at a time, utilities now have to lay out a 3-year rate plan in advance and tie part of their profits to how well they perform on affordability and reliability. For lower income Hoosiers, the law requires utilities to offer bill assistance programs, automatically enroll eligible customers in more predictable monthly billing, and it protects them from losing power during dangerous summer heat.
And Kinsley's law also went into effect. It's named for 5-year-old Kinsley Welty, who was allegedly starved to death by her mother, who's currently awaiting a retrial for her daughter's murder. Under the new law, a Department of Child Services employee is required to actually see an alleged victim of child abuse in person before making a determination on how the child is doing or closing out the case.
Another law that's taken effect expands Indiana's definition of sexual grooming. This law updates Indiana code so that certain repeated communications with a child can be prosecuted as sexual grooming, especially when the intent is to condition a child for future sexual activity. The law also prohibits certain convicted offenders from working, volunteering, or entering facilities or any event primarily for children, like schools, camps, and child-focused programs.
There's also the state's new cell phone ban during school hours. This will be the first school year under the ban. The law requires schools to prohibit students from using cell phones the entire school day, with exceptions for emergencies, medical needs, and learning accommodations. The ban covers more than just phones, and the restrictions also apply to smartwatches, gaming devices, and other personal electronics. Under the new law, schools are required to adopt formal policies for the ban and put them in their student handbook. The law requires devices to be put away or stored during the school day. It's up to the schools to decide if devices must be stored in lockers or backpacks or locked in a storage system managed by the school.
And they're talking about it right now. We just got an email from my kid's school about it for this fall. Another law updates Indiana's hot car law, certainly timely given this intense heat wave we're under right now. It gives people who break into a hot car to rescue an animal immunity, both at the civil level and criminal level, if they first call 911, believe the animal is in imminent danger, and if they stay with that animal until help gets there. The new law also expands what legally counts as neglect and abuse, and it increases penalties for serious cases.
And if you'd like to shop at those weekend farmers markets, a new law goes into effect that changes how Indiana regulates homemade food producers and small farms. The new law removes many of the licensing and inspection requirements that have been in place for years, making it easier for small farms and home-based food businesses to sell directly to consumers, while significantly limiting the ability of state and local governments to regulate them.
And when it comes to alcohol sales at your local county fair, whether you'll be able to buy a beer there depends on the county. A new law gives county fair boards the option to allow alcohol sales, but it doesn't require them to do so. Before this law, county fairs were still able to sell alcohol using vendors who were already licensed for alcohol sales or to vendors who had to get temporary permits just for the fair. Now there's a statewide framework for all of this, so county fair boards can get one annual permit and then let vendors sell alcohol under that in approved areas of the fairgrounds. Also this week, drivers learned we will keep getting a break at the gas pump for at least another month. Governor Braun ordered a third extension of his gas tax suspension, also called the gas tax holiday. Hoosiers have not paid state taxes on their gasoline since April.
What it's meant for the past few months is that Hoosiers have seen some of the lowest gas prices in the country. The governor talks a lot about affordability being a top priority, and this week he said this was a way to show Hoosiers he's doing everything he can when it comes to that issue.
By law, though, it's the last time the governor can suspend taxes at the pump. The first time came in early April when he suspended the sales tax on gas. In May, he continued that suspension and added to it, suspending a second tax, the gas excise tax. Indiana drivers pay two state taxes at the pump, a flat excise tax per gallon that stays the same, and a separate gasoline tax or sales tax that's adjusted based on the cost of fuel. In June, Governor Braun announced another extension of both. Thursday, he said that same suspension would continue for one more month.
These savings will carry us through the heavy travel time of summer across the 4th of July and beyond. And it's another example of using every tool you can in your toolbox and being able to do it in a way where if you run government efficiently and you're getting the right economic development on the revenue side, you get a win-win.
This is the last time Governor Braun can use this tool on his own. To extend the suspensions any longer would require authorization from lawmakers, with the governor calling them into a special session. We asked the governor if he was considering that.
I'm going to take everything into consideration, but obviously, if we did do anything, the legislature would have to be interested in doing it.
And the governor was asked if he had had any discussions with Republican leadership about meeting to suspend that gas tax holiday. Do lawmakers have the appetite to meet to do that? He said that had not been discussed.
Correct. Yeah. Also this week, Governor Braun directed the state to reimburse local governments for any revenue they've missed during his gas tax suspension. That's been going since April when he first suspended the gas sales tax. The governor says state leaders are working to calculate a necessary amount to make local governments whole again. The state budget director will take the governor's request to transfer funds from the state highway fund for April and May to the state's Board of Finance on July 21st.
And then local governments can expect reimbursement from the state comptroller's office within 5 to 7 business days, so about a week's time.
And school's out for summer, which means many families are needing childcare.
But the number of providers is apparently headed in the wrong direction.
And so we know when there are fewer places for them across our state that, that just increases that struggle for families.
It is a struggle. Coming up, Early Learning Indiana describes a troubling trend and how it's hitting Hoosier pocketbooks.
It's a rock and a hard place, right? Like go back and potentially be killed or stay here and potentially end up in detention.
And thousands of refugees left scrambling as they're stripped of the immigration status that allowed them to live and work here legally.
That's all. And this, America celebrates the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. How communities large and small are going to celebrate this weekend. Next on Crossroads Politics.
Welcome back. This weekend, America celebrates its 250th birthday. Across the nation, communities large and small will hold festivals and, of course, fireworks shows.
President Trump will oversee a special celebration from the nation's capital, as Alice Barr reports from Washington.
You can see it from the skies across America, mowed into a lawn in North Carolina.
250th on rolled around one time.
Formed in a human Liberty Bell in Philadelphia, Americans making their mark on 250 years of history. But it's what we'll see in the skies that'll really steal the show. Boston giving an early peek as New York is welcoming majestic tall ships while working out its finishing fireworks touches.
Nonstop action and beautiful art in the sky.
And in Washington, D.C., final preparations for what's billed as the world's largest fireworks display.
At least 100 times more than an average 4th of July display that you would see.
President Trump is set to speak on the National Mall for the Freedom 250 Salute to America.
Right now you have the hottest country anywhere in the world, and we do.
The event's start time now delayed from 1 to 5 p.m. because of the triple-digit heat. Organizers urging everyone to stay hydrated, as other celebrations have already been hit by heat emergencies. Here in Berks County, Pennsylvania, EMTs lost count of how many people they had to help.
It was that busy, we just lost count here.
The heat is not keeping travelers home, with airports seeing a surge, just as storms in the south forced flight delays and overheated tracks delayed or canceled some trains. AAA estimates more than 72 million Americans will travel for the holiday.
4th of July has always been my favorite holiday.
Americans eager to celebrate a milestone 4th of July, as officials urge everyone to keep an eye on the heat as well as the skies. In Washington, Alice Barr, NBC News.
Yeah, the heat is on. Also, another story in the news this week. Hoosiers dealing with the fallout of an earlier Supreme Court decision. So last week, the court it cleared the way for the Trump administration to end temporary protected status, TPS, for Haitians.
Yeah, thousands call Indiana home. I spoke with advocates for them as these families face some tough questions.
At Exodus Refugee Immigration, a nonprofit that works with immigrants and refugees, the phone hasn't stopped ringing since Thursday afternoon.
Mostly clients that are concerned, community members who are, what's going to happen to them, what happens next.
The questions, many of them coming from Indiana's Haitian community, who until yesterday's ruling by the United States Supreme Court had temporary protected status.
It means that a person shouldn't be forced to return to their country because it's dangerous there for one reason or another.
Temporary protected status, or TPS, gives people from certain countries permission to legally live and work in the U.S. when it's considered too unsafe for them to return home, maybe because of war, some kind of natural disaster like an earthquake, or even a disease outbreak. It's estimated some 350,000 Haitians are here in the U.S. under TPS. In November, the Trump administration made the decision to revoke that status, a move that was put on hold in February as legal battles over it took place in the lower courts. Thursday, though, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled the administration could move forward with its original order, revoking TPS for Haitian and Syrian immigrants living here under it. Now those immigrants wait to hear what comes next.
It's only been 24 hours, so it may happen today, it could happen next week, I'm not sure.
It's a wait that comes with questions still unanswered, like, without TPS, are these immigrants now considered here illegally, just 24 hours after the SCOTUS decision? And what about their work permits and jobs they legally had with them? Not to mention the bigger question, if they can't stay here legally, where do they go now? Much of Haiti has been overtaken by violent gangs, making daily life dangerous for many residents. The U.S. State Department has issued a Level 4 travel advisory, warning it's too dangerous to travel there.
It's a rock and a hard place, right? Like, go back and potentially be killed, or stay here and potentially end up in detention. That doesn't seem like it's a Sophie's choice if I've ever heard one.
Not everyone is unhappy with the SCOTUS decision. Indiana Attorney General Todd Rokita put out a post on X, calling the decision, quote, a massive win for the rule of law. In less than a week, a new Indiana law goes into effect that will give Rokita the authority to investigate businesses suspected of hiring people not legally authorized to work in the U.S. Van Tuyl says that will likely impact Haitians who had a work permit under TPS, but after Thursday's SCOTUS decision, now don't.
Temperatures are rising as kids try and enjoy summer break.
And the cost of childcare is rising fast, too.
We know that early education programs operate on the thinnest of margins. And so those small adjustments in their programs for many of them, at least for 200 across our state, they weren't able to sustain their businesses.
Yeah, 200 fewer centers across the state. Coming up, my conversation with Early Learning Indiana, tracking a troubling trend and what's causing it. It's next here on Crossroads Politics. Welcome back. Okay, parents, grandparents, caretakers, you know how tough it is right now to find childcare, and a new report is showing just how tough.
A group called Early Learning Indiana tracks the numbers every quarter. It's a real-time snapshot of how well the system is meeting the needs of kids and working families, and you talked to the head of that organization this week.
I did, and they found the system is still strained, and not surprisingly, it's more expensive than ever for parents. Here's our conversation.
We started producing this report back in 2021 just to keep track of what was happening with access and affordability across the state of Indiana. And during this, over the past 5 years, this is the first time that we've actually seen a decline in the available capacity for families that are in need of early education for their young children.
When you first saw those results, given what you do, what was the first thought that came to your mind?
I mean, it's not surprising. We understand, the strain that the system has been under over the last 18 months. And so we kind of had expected we might have seen this in our first quarter report, but that isn't what we saw. And so not terribly surprising that this time we saw the decline.
Why do you think you did see a decline?
Well, the early education space has been, like I said, under a strain really since late 24, when we know that the funding system, the funding structure began to take a change. And so, many programs were reliant on what was happening with those state and federal funding dollars flowing through their programs. And so that really is what put them at risk of closure. And we know that early education programs operate on the thinnest of margins. And so those small adjustments in their programs for many of them, at least for 200 across our state, they weren't able to sustain their businesses.
Let's talk about some of the key findings here. Capacity. The total number of programs fell from 4,740 in December of 25 to 4,547 in May of this year. High quality programs declined as well. And then you also found the percentage of children able to be served dropped. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's exactly what we noticed. And so really, just those market conditions that we know are causing programs to not be able to keep their doors open. And we know the impact this has on young children and their families. When there are fewer programs available for a family to select, it becomes harder. And, part of this report was also a reflection of families' ability. Where are they selecting care? And, 51% of the families in our survey responded that they struggle to find care for their children. And so we know when there are fewer places for them across our state that, that just increases that struggle for families. And so we, are going to continue to monitor this. We will produce this report every quarter and just to keep our, thumb on the pulse of what is happening particularly with capacity and affordability.
Indiana has made childcare a bipartisan workforce issue over the last two years. We've seen that at the State House. Lawmakers and the governor say they've focused on helping families afford care and making it easier for providers to expand capacity. There have been expanded childcare vouchers, new employer-supported child tax care credits. Just looking at some of these notes here, proposed licensing reforms. Do you see any hope on the horizon that any of this will eventually make a difference in the pipeline?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, the action the state took back in the spring, the governor's office requesting the funds from the Frog Fund to become available for additional childcare vouchers to be in the market, I think was a great positive first step. And we're starting to see those things trickle out over the last month now. And I know, the estimates are that might serve up to 14,000 additional children. And so we're all for additional access. And so I think that's a great first step in making a change in this space. I do think that there is the regulatory reform that is open for public comment right now. Also holds some possibility for increased affordability as it really reduces some of the regulatory burdens that in particular licensed childcare centers bear. I think we do want to always consider the quality options, that we know that the educators in early education classrooms are the difference makers, and the way that they are prepared to not only keep a child healthy and safe, but to attend to their development and to attend to managing children in a group setting in a classroom. Those things are really important, and we are keeping a close eye on that part of the regulatory reform as well.
Hey, work to be done. Aaron Kissling, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
So I guess we'll see if the actions lawmakers have already taken will make a difference with this issue moving forward.
And whether lawmakers introduce more legislation in the future to address it.
Yeah, something to watch this session. Okay, and that does it for this week's episode of Crossroads Politics. I'm Emily Longnecker.
And I'm Dustin Grove. For all of us here at 13 News, thanks for watching. We hope to see you next time.